Mystic Raven on ESO Daily on the PS4, and today we're going to be talking about a very controversial subject to many ESO players. And if you haven't heard, well, you're about to hear it. Yesterday afternoon, I received an email announcing that Neverwinter is coming to PS4. That's right. For all the Dungeons and Dragons fans out there, it has been confirmed that Dungeons and Dragons will be released for PS4 this summer. Now, an exact release date has not been announced, but the question is out there: what does this mean for Elder Scrolls? And there's a lot of things that we need to take a look at when discussing this subject. First off, we're going to basically be comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, because essentially they're both the same type of game, but they're different type of apples. So we have a red apple and we have a gold apple. Not, saying which one's which color, but they have different texture, different shapes, and it's kind of important because when you take a look at the different elements that each game offers, depending on your play style, is what's going to determine whether or not this is going to affect you as a gamer, personally. Now, let's first talk about what Elder Scrolls has that Neverwinter doesn't. And to me, this is crafting. When it comes to the crafting element of a game, Elder Scrolls beats most MMOs hands down. Why? It's not that the crafted gear is necessarily better than the drop gear, but it keeps it's usable in that content. Where in most MMOs, traditionally, crafted gear will only get you up to a certain point. In Elder Scrolls, that's not the case. So we really need to examine, if you're like crafted gear and you like being a crafter, you're probably not going to take to Dungeons and Dragons. You may try it, but I don't think that you're going to like it. Because once again, Elder Scrolls just has a lot of depth when it comes to crafted gear, customization, and making it feasible to use, and also match up with dropped gear, whether it be your primary or your offset. So in that aspect, Elder Scrolls is still the lead contender. Now, when it comes to content for PvE, hands down, Dungeons and Dragons has a heavy advantage over Elder Scrolls. It's not because Elder Scrolls just, doesn't have it. You're talking about Forgotten Realms, which most game developers have inspired from playing Dungeons and Dragons as kids. And then you take one of the largest campaign settings, Forgotten Realms, add Salvatore, who wrote one of the main characters for Forgotten Realms, which was Driss Do'Urden, and now you have a plethora of lore along with traditional RPG elements as a gamer at your, in front of you. This is kind of big because when it comes to dungeon crawlers, Dungeons and Dragons, it will smoke Elder Scrolls. So if you like crawling different dungeons and experiencing new environments, then Dungeons and Dragons is definitely going to really overpower Elder Scrolls in that ring. Now, when we take a look at PvP, once again, to me, there's no question, Elder Scrolls has the best siege engine I have seen since Dark Age of Camelot. Now, keep that in mind, that is my opinion, but if you read forums and you do search on the internet, a lot of Dungeons and Dragons PvPers are not happy. Well, why is this, Mystic? Well, simple. It's a class-based game. Now, once again, we do have classes in Elder Scrolls, but keep in mind this is more of a sandbox platform, meaning that we can adjust our skills, and so can Dungeons and Dragons. But our passives and our armor and all of these things will take effect in how it affects our PvP. Where Dungeons and Dragons, there's just a lot of unbalanced classes that cannot be competitive when it comes to PvP. So if you're going to be a PvPer and you like that traditional siege and watching buildings crumble at your feet, well, Elder Scrolls is not going to. You're not going to leave Elder Scrolls for that. One of the biggest news, though, that has to be, known, and this is going, I think, once again, going to affect, though, Elder Scrolls, is you don't need PlayStation Plus to play Neverwinter or Elder Scrolls. You do. That's huge. That's massive. That is insane. Most MMOs that are coming out, though, are trying to steer away from having to have that. And for Elder Scrolls to still require that, it might end up hurting them in the long run, where for Neverwinter, they're basically offering it even if you don't have PlayStation Plus. Now, here's the good question. Do you need to even buy the game itself to play Neverwinter? Well, the answer is no. It's going to be completely free. It's like, wow, guys. I mean, it's pretty amazing. That is going to be a huge determining factor moving in. Now, a lot of people are like, are you a bandwagon jumper? No, I'm an MMOer, and I've been doing this for 20 years, since the first one, which was, Ultima Online. I played EverQuest, I played World of Warcraft, I played Tabula Rasa, I played Rift, I played Age of Conan, played Vanguard, the list go, and SWG, City of Heroes, City of Villains, all of them, which is another thing, too, because Neverwinter is made by Cryptic Studio, who was the developer for City of Heroes and City of Villains. So it's not like these developers don't know what they're doing. And the fact that even though it's taken them this long to put it out for the PS4, they've had an advantage of working with the Xbox to kind of refine any known issues they've had in the past to make it even more polished coming out for the PS4. Now, it's going to be kind of interesting because for me personally, I don't see myself going to Elder Scrolls permanently. I mean, not Elder Scrolls, Neverwinter. Can I see myself going to Neverwinter permanently over Elder Scrolls? I can literally tell you the answer is no. I've been in love with Elder Scrolls since Morrowind. So, me personally, I love what Elder Scrolls offers me personally as a gamer, and that's the sandbox type platform. Now, there are a couple things I kind of would like to see in the future, especially when it comes to content and coming out with new dungeons by Elder Scrolls. Somebody's trying to trade with me. But, nevertheless, I honestly think that when it comes to most players, the question about it is what can they afford, what can't they afford, what type of playstyle they're wanting to play, whether it be PvE or PvP, and whether or not the game is meant for them. Now, Neverwinter does have a very fast action-based playstyle, and much comparable to Elder Scrolls in my opinion, which is great when you're taking a look at it, but once again, it's a class-based game. It has the core values of Dungeons and Dragons. So once again, it's an apple, and this is an apple, but they're two different apples. And you have to, which one do you prefer? But like I said, crafting to me is where it's at. I like to have a lot of different options personally as a player. Elder Scrolls gives me that freedom. I'm not saying that Dungeons and Dragons isn't, it's not tempting, because as a gamer, especially an MMOer, the temptation's always going to be there. I was a beta tester for Neverwinter when it was being developed, on PC, and I did like the game, and what it had to offer from a D&D standpoint. But as far as a PvP, because once again I like to PvP, it lacked all of those essential elements that I look for as a PvPer. So I was unable to stay with the game at that time because of the lack of PvP. PvE, it definitely has a lot to offer. Now, also the PC has a GM feature. Whether or not they're going to incorporate that in the PlayStation, I honestly don't know. I haven't tried the Xbox platform. I might actually get on it on the Xbox just to see it, to see whether or not they have that, put into the console. I don't know if they do or they don't, but Cryptic actually utilized this feature in City of Heroes before the Fallout, and it was a well received. I've actually made a couple of dungeons myself in City of Heroes. I got to play with it a little bit in the testing for Dungeons and Dragons. They do a great job, and I can honestly see a lot of players, wanting to try Dungeons and Dragons. Whether or not, though, Elder Scrolls can retain its customers is the question. Going forward, I think Elder Scrolls really needs to address a couple of issues to try to retain its players. One, are they locked in to requiring the PlayStation Plus? Once again, this is huge because as a Elder Scrolls player, I have to maintain my PlayStation Plus to play Elder Scrolls. Where Neverwinter, I don't have to. That saves me money. And if PlayStation really wants to retain members of the PlayStation Plus, they might want to take in consideration revamping some of the PS2 and the PS3 games and offering those as the monthly free games versus some of the more questionable games that they want to try to offer. Because there's only been I think one game since I've had PlayStation Plus that I was mildly interested in. So, that's a PlayStation issue. And once again, in Elders or ZeniMax and Bethesda, whether or not going forward they can try to escape that clause. So for me personally, it comes down to also PvE content for Elder Scrolls. Going forward, I can honestly tell you as a player, I want more dungeons. I want the older ones turn into vets. I want to see new dungeons. The delves are nice. The new lands that they implement are great. Some of the changes, I can't stress enough how great the devs do when it comes to implementing content into the game. The problem of it is it's not enough to keep the players content because a lot of players like to chase the carrots. And for an MMO, that's the most important feature. What carrots are you putting out there for people to chase? And it always comes down to dungeons and gear. For me, for crafting, I want to see more viable craftable gear. Looking at the Dark Brotherhood, I was kind of disappointed with there's not another caster set. You see a stam set, you see a tank set, you see some of the new PvP sets, especially for the districts, but nothing really catchable for the caster class because everybody's still going to be clinging to Julianus, and or even a healer set. So you've really got to incorporate this and then add new dungeon content, add new races to Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls is its own universe. It doesn't really have to adhere to Token or the same platform that Dungeons and Dragons traditionally used to. So you can kind of experiment and go out on a limb to create new races, new creatures, and see what elements work moving forward. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to break the lore, and that's an important, aspect of this game as well. But from a player standpoint, I can literally say, I want to see more dungeons. I want to see a lot more dungeons. So, devs, if you do watch this, I hope you guys are taking notes from a player's perspective and, addressing some of these issues. also, when you're taking a look at your crown or your microtransactions, you know, you really want to pay attention. You want to pay close attention to what your competitors are doing versus what you're doing, because as an ESO Plus member, I personally like having my ESO Plus versus buying the DLCs. Though now it is nice that you have those options, but I feel like there's not a lot of, things in the microtransaction sense that makes me really want to go forward with a lot of different purchases. Dungeons and Dragons offers different races that you don't get up front, and different packs that you can just buy to access that and affect your gameplay essentially. So, once again, as from a development standpoint, but would it help you guys in the future? Try to put this online for free? I don't know. That's in your marketing and in your company's decision. But as a player, these are concerning questions. So for any player watching this, it has been confirmed that Dungeons and Dragons will be coming out this summer, PS4. I probably will be doing a review when it launches. And do a better comparison of what's working and what isn't. But I rest assured, everybody, I will be staying with Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls, for me personally, is where it's at because the PvP is just that great. Once again, one of the best siege engines next to the Dark Age of Camelot, and that to me is always going to keep me locked into this game unless somebody comes out with something totally mind-blowing. Crafted gear, when it comes to viable crafted gear in endgame, once again, Elder Scrolls locks that down, makes it viable, and you can't beat that. It makes crafters, a necessity. And once again, as a player, I appreciate that. And again, once again, the sandbox platform. Once again, it is class-based, but it's a sandbox platform. And I've was originally a UO player, so as a UO player and an SWG and all this, I like a sandbox aspect to a game. I would love to see anybody's comments and predictions. Whether or not, what do you think this is going to do? Can the Scrolls survive the Neverwinter? Please leave your comments below. I would love to read them. If you have any questions, also leave a comment. If you liked the video, please feel free to subscribe. I would love to see what everybody's thinking about this this news, and whether or not it's going to affect your gameplay, whether or not you're going to try it. So people, please, fill up the lines. Let's hear what you got to say. Once again and always, I do want to thank you for watching, and you all have a nice day.